Believe it or not, some more regarding a neural revolution is possible participation in a 3D reality regarding what could be, from a certain mapping view, the only truly in a 3D reality, the only non-win-lose game. You know that last time we were taping, we were already talking about that. But the ordinary mind could take this, since it's not an absolutely new idea, basically. I'm even, of course, using a phrase out of game theory and I guess fairly common everyday conversation amongst some people now about win-lose situation, win-lose games. It's simply another reflection of polarized energy being the inescapable, minimum energy that's visibly available to run a 3D reality. I keep waiting for somebody to write in and say, well, what would it take to run a 5D reality? And I almost did write in. But I figured, Jesus, this is confusing enough. The ordinary mind quite easily can see that what we've been calling the primary, just the basic, physical, tangible, somatic running of human life without any doubt could be seen as being win-lose. To put it in those more grandiose terms, the natural situation of eat or be at. And so you're talking about win-lose there. But it would be easy enough for the ordinary intelligence to believe it was following what we were talking about, since many people's ordinary intelligence is smitten, which is a horrible sight, by the idea, the possibility of metaphor. And so an ordinary intelligence could push this on and say, well, I see where you're going, or I bet I smell what you're going to point towards. And they could take, you remember the equation that we were using, of I plus not I equals everything. An ordinary intellect could take what we've been talking about regarding the equation in various ways and the idea of a win-lose game, and it could conclude this, that if we were going to push it beyond simply the physical level, that you've got to, whether you do it literally or not, that you and every other creature are fighting for physical sustenance, and you've got to live on that basis. And so even if you're not fighting literally some other not I, that you're not literally fighting another human, you're fighting the weight of the ages. You're fighting your own chronological movement in years. You're fighting your health. And so that every day that you get up, it is like a win-lose game. You either make it through the day or you don't. Ordinary intelligence could say, well, now, if you're going to try and become a bit symbolic, if not metaphorical, and push on, I can already see some validity. And they could, as they have in the past, without benefit of our little talks and equations and misuses of the human language, and could say, well, where this is going, I can already see. And it could take this, the next step to it, to mean, well, what this win-lose situation is this. All you're about to point to is, I already know, is it's I against all the not I's. And that's all that equation, that's all that you're pointing towards beyond the physical limit, beyond any possibility of us actually fighting, which in a sense you are out in the job market and etc. But instead of it actually being down to the animalistic level of actually eating or being eaten, that what you're about to point out, I know what you're going to say, because there is that same kind of win-lose game, because even in the intellectual marketplace, the sexual, the spiritual, the psychological, everything this side of physically having to destroy, subdue some other human, somewhere beyond that, in a non-physical realm, it is still win-lose, and it's I against all the not I's. So that there is a continuing, it would think, win-lose game going on. And at that level there does appear to be. It is the kind of friction that does run the secondary world. And from there, it could appear to be a small step, and at city level it could appear to be a reasonable, it's not a meaningful step to go, well, it is in fact me against life. That there is such an equation as this, and it's me struggling, that it is, even if a person's not religiously based as their forefathers might have been, and the idea that I am on some kind of battlefield, or man is a battlefield between good and evil, up and down, chocolate and vanilla, that there is still a struggle. I can feel it with no religious connotations whatsoever. It is me against all the not me's. I begin to feel like it's me against life. Now, they might get a bit more specific if they weren't as philosophical as most bricklayers and say, well, when I say me against life, it's me against the stupidity of life. It is me against the short-sightedness of life. It is me against the provincial views of life. But yes, indeed, there is a win-lose game going on, and yes, indeed, they could say, I can see it from a non-physical, a more metaphysical, a more metaphorical view. But what it amounts to now is, instead of physically fighting, it is me, a right-thinking, liberal, Republican, Whig, free-market Marxist, against all those who disagree, whoever they'd be. Don't make me have to make that up too. And so they would say there is a win-lose game. Whether we're talking about I am a free-market economist as against a planned economist, that it is now not a win-lose game on the kind of battlefield in which an opposing economist and I, that one of us might kill the other. We might now meet on the floor of the House of Commons, the halls of Congress, in an executive office somewhere to a president or prime minister arguing our positions. But if the game has any meaning, it still has to be a win-lose game, because I have spent my whole life developing, if his name was Professor Persimore, that I have developed, as all of you know, the Persimore curve to explain the Persimorean view of world economics. Don't anybody write me and ask me. So, and he could say, I've spent my whole life developing this. So here I am, placed before the president, the prime minister, the king, and he wants to hear our new views of how we should move the kingdom's economy along. And so I've got to present my views, and of course there's going to be somebody else presenting his views. It is a win-lose game, or else it is no game. Because the king, if later he says, well, I've listened to both views, and I've talked about it, and I've discussed it, and I'll be damned if I can decide what to do, so we're not going to do anything. Such a king is on a short taxi ride. They may run him around the block to run the meter up, but that man's not going anywhere, as you should know. That's the part of being king. That's the part of running some kingdom. That's the part of even two-dimensional appearing, polarized energy apparently grounding out somewhere, so that, hey, do something, even if it's wrong. That is, some action will be taken. So if the game, in this case, what the king, prime minister decides to do about the economic future of the country, if he's going to decide to do anything, that is, the game's going to continue, then he has to make some decision. And so he says, I have decided to use Professor whoever I said's theory. We're now going to run our economy in this manner, or I'm going to take, no offense to him, but I'm going to take Dr. X, the economist that we brought in, and his view, I think, is the better one for the time being, and we're going with that. It has to be win-lose, or else the game has lost any particular, at least immediate, any significance. And since we have a moment here before the commercial, again, for those of you who may just be tuning in, could I point out, forget economics and kings and all that crap. It's the movement of energy in the human neural system. That's what you're listening right up to, and that's what we're pointing at, see? It's thinking. It's the processes in this kingdom. It's got nothing to do with economics. Well, it does, but we don't have any interest in economics and politics and win-lose games and the game theory. I'm talking about how in a three-dimensional reality, it is polarized energy, and at any particular time, the positive or the negative has got to apparently triumph. The dance cannot go on. No one can dance out here unless you look up and somebody, one of those people, is dancing backwards. If nobody's going to dance backwards, then you look up and what have you got? You don't have a dance. You have a pose. It's no longer in a live movie, it's a still shot. In other words, there is no game going on. So this idea of a win-lose game, you look up, and from the ordinary view, you'd say whoever's dancing forward is winning. In our great, as they call it, sexist world, most of us of the male persuasion still try to dance forward. And so you look up, and at least the thing is moving. But for it to move, you do understand both partners cannot attempt to lead, nor can both partners attempt to follow. So there is at all times the appearance of a win-lose game. And ordinary intelligence says yes, 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 yes physically, and yes to all that crap you just said, assuming you understand any of it. You're right. There's always apparently somebody having to dominate. It may change. I didn't know ordinary intelligence was that smart. Sure, it may change. The king next month may go, well, seeing as how I just about lost my ass in the stock market, I believe that I picked the wrong guy. I was fooled, it wasn't my fault, and etc. But we're going back with this other guy's theory. It can always change, but it has to be the absolute appearance that there is a win-lose situation at any given time, or there is no game. There is no dance if it's not moving. You cannot think unless you think that, yes, this is true and that's not, or yes, I believe that and I don't believe that. You can only think if you got something to not think about. You can only decide that something is correct if you've got something to decide that's not correct. It is at all times a win-lose game going on. It's a win-lose game going on when you plug into an AC outlet and expect your blender to work. It's a win-lose game. If it doesn't come on, there is no game. There is no blender, there is no ice cream, no margaritas, no joy tonight. If anything is alive, there is in a true sense a win-lose game going on. Or an AC motor, well, even DC, but never mind, let's don't confuse it. An AC motor will not run. The lights will not come on. The TV cameras won't work. It has to be a win-lose game. And ordinary intelligence will follow it this far and say, yes, that's true. I can see great metaphysical, metaphorical, even symbolistic, never mind that, truth in what you say. But it still sees it. It now thinks, well, an ordinary intelligence could say, I am getting better because I do not see it simply as a tapir attacking, what do tapirs attack? Tapeworms. I do not see it as a lion, simply a win-lose game of a lion attacking Bambi. I see what you're getting at. It is now in the world of the intellect. Okay? You're going good. And ordinary intelligence says, thank you, and I see it still, and no matter how they try to describe it after that, it still gets back to, in years past, good and evil. Gods and anti-gods. And now that many people are much more sophisticated than that, they don't believe in gods and devils. They believe in truth and error. God, talk about progress. It will take your breath away. You know, if you don't have much breath and you're from out of town. See, that was dramatic sarcasm, not serious sarcasm. If it had been serious sarcasm, none of you would have laughed. They could hear because you go, God damn, he's talking about me. Of course, it would still see the game as being win-lose even when it gets beyond the merely consuming level of the physical eat or be eaten. Because that is exactly the same basis. It appears to be more metaphorical. It appears to be otherworldly. It appears to be invisible. It appears to be of a higher order. That the truth will eventually overcome error. That's the only way the world works. But that is exactly the same basis as saying, eventually, a lion will overcome a deer. No, it's not. No, this is something else. Right. Oh, yes. No doubt about that. That is how the ordinary intellect sees such an equation. That's how it sees any game. And take game now out of the idea of game theory and ordinary usage, as you should know, and take it to every other possible description that we've used in the past. The dance, being alive, trying to see beyond the ordinary limits that the mind needs to see. That's all the game theory. But the game theory is a part of that. And it is still, as always, split right down win/lose. It is always polar-based energy within a three-dimensional frame. That's all you've got. You can apparently be talking about sociological matters, mathematical matters, questions of logic, questions of economics, politics, no matter what it is, it's a win-lose game. And if it appears to get more metaphorical, ordinary intellect can say, geez, I'm getting better and better because now I can follow some of this crap. Even I can think metaphorically. But they can't. It is still seeing a lion eat Bambi. It is still seeing that, well, let's say I know some things to be true, or at least I like them. But in that case, somebody's dancing backwards. And don't look out there. That's what ordinary intellects will do. Well, sure, if you want to put it that way. Other people are dancing backwards, the fools. When I got a right idea and they're wrong, to carry your metaphor, it could be saying to me, then they're dancing backwards. Forget out there. You're dancing backwards in here. The only way that you can think. You got to dance for yourself. What do you think the partner is? What do you think the old man and the kid is? What do you think all this thing about kingdoms? I know you know all that. Yeah, but sometimes I forget. Well, you hadn't been feeling well lately. I know. Whereas ordinary intellect would see that there is, without any doubt, a win-lose game, whether it was taken in the context of ordinary people as being religious, intellectual, sociological, economic, political, or any other way. Even anything having to do with green grocery shopping. Regardless of all that, it would see it as yes, 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 there is a struggle going on, which is simply life. They look up on the dance floor and, my God, half the people out there are being pushed around. That's true. If they could look a little further, they could get down into an AC motor and think, my God, half the time that poor little motor is running in the wrong direction. Or electricity, if you want to really get close to, hate to be religious, but if you want to get close to being religious, if you could look down and you could see, and you were quick enough to look down at the atomic level, you would look down and a nice, just an AC line, just a power cord coming out, the kind of thing without which you cannot live, that drives your TV, your CD player. If you could look in there, you would see that half the time, there are two versions of this, but you people are smart enough to understand that. Half the time, half those poor, helpless little electrons are running in the opposite direction. Or looked at from your view, if you could see it, you're waiting for the TV to come on, and you look down. In there, you're paying Con Edison, Pacific Gas and Water. You're looking at that line, you're paying the money, and you would look down, and at any given time, half the electrons are running out, not in. But who but a fool is going to say, well, I want half my money back? Or something bad's going to happen. Let's assume that all of you know just a little basic electronics, or at least you can piece it together from that. You do understand that half the time, or at all the time, half the electrons are going in the opposite direction. That's why they call it AC current. It's alternating. It seems to go here and then there. But if you look at it that way, you go, wait a minute. What the hell am I paying for that half the electricity is running back in the wall? You know, bring it all out here, leave it here. You know, maybe my TV would look better. Some of my old records would sound better if I could get all, you know. That's idiocy. But that's the same thing as going, well, life is a struggle. It is a win-lose game. And it is a matter of good overcoming evil, truth overcoming error. Right. We're going to get all the electrons running in this direction. Does anybody have any idea what would happen if you did? I don't claim to be an expert. Well, I know this, something unsavory would happen. At the very least, if you could get all the electrons running, you know, so they'd quit going back to wherever, you know, those dirty scoundrels at Con Ed got things arranged where they charge you for, you know, X amount of electrons. I know they do it another way, but they charge you so much a month. And you come to find out, when you think about that, half of them, some way they got it arranged that half of them go back. And you thought, no, I want them all, and somebody could make them all stay once you plugged in and, you know, turn on the light and turn on your machine. At the least, what would happen, it wouldn't work. You do understand that. I was going to be more dramatic and say it might blow up. But why frighten children? At least I guarantee this, it wouldn't work. If all the electrons ran this direction, it would no longer be AC current, it would be, I guess, C. Or it'd be, they've already used this term, but it'd be like DC, dead current, or UC, useless current. But still, is that not what the ordinary mind sees as the great struggles between competing philosophies, cosmic forces, gods, demons, the truth, error? What it's saying is, all right, I love a good dance. I love being alive. I'm in favor of good dancing, of course, not old cheap dancing. And what the mind is saying is, I want everybody, men, women, children, dogs, cats, trees, squirrels, but everybody on the dance floor. What it's saying is, I want everybody to dance forward. You do understand? That's no dance anymore. I want all the electrons, when they come in my house, I want them to come in and stay here. I don't want half them going back. Screw all that stuff about AC. That's some kind of theory that they made up just to get half the electricity back and charge me for all of it. No, I want it all to stay here. If it did, the dance would stop. Your toaster would stop. Everything stops. But then the ordinary mind, if it goes any further past that and takes it into the great ROM, the realm of metaphor, it goes, yes, it is a struggle. It is a struggle. It's me against all the not me's. It's I against all the not I's. Not just physically, but the right part of me, the right thinking part, the intelligent part of me against all of the other Philistines, the dunderheads of the world. We must overcome them. If not me, other right thinking people. There must be somebody else in the world besides me. We'll all some way overcome. We'll become the reality sanitation department at the end of the parade, and we'll finally overtake them, and we'll catch up, and we'll take over. Right. To stretch it even further, if you could do all that and you got the head of the parade and you looked around, there'd be no parade. There's no dance if everybody goes in the same direction. Nothing will work if all the electrons come in and they stay there. But the ordinary mind would take the idea of a win-lose game as a contest, as a struggle, and they would knowingly go, yes. Literally, yes. Figuratively, yes. Could I suggest to you that from another view, if you could get outside the limits, if you could think somewhere else in the brain, if you could look in a different way in the nervous system, it was not limited to at least the current structure of polarized energy running your brain, that you would see this kind of so-called win-lose game, not as a contest, not as anything about you, not just physically now, but here, of your thoughts against other thoughts, of your correct thinking against all the other incorrect thinking. It's not even, I'm not even going to give you a new version of that. It's into a whole different key. It's a whole different song. From a new view, from a view that was not limited to that kind of polarized energy. From a neo-revolutionist view, how about that? Could I suggest that it would see the win-lose game as tied to the equation and everything that I've talked about? It would see it as all being a healthy affirmation of the viewer, the I, and the not I, and the equation, and life, of everyone respectively looking after their own private interest. That's all that needs to be said. Thank you. Now if you turn to page 17 in your anti-hymnals or your hurrials, not to be sexist. Try saying hurrials. Still, some of what we're talking about, I wanted to take it a little more private, a little more personal. You remember we were talking about the possibility that we made up, I'll let you share the blame, of the great question of watch control. And how, for whatever reason, that life could have its own interest, at least pondering the possibility, but at least it has an interest enough to ponder it. Or perhaps we should have some kind of control, restrictions over the private ownership of timepieces. Well, you're all familiar with it, but now we've been talking about it for damn 2 weeks, which is forever here. The great watch control debate. And how a real revolutionist, if he had any interest whatsoever and heard about it, he might run out and get a watch. Just so he'd have one. Who knows why? But with no interest in whatever life's debate's about. It doesn't matter whether he's not concerned if finally it disappears. He doesn't think, boy, I got screwed. They made me go out. Because you can buy a watch for what, $1.98? He's going to holler, boy, life really pushed me around again, made me think, well, I wasn't going to be able to watch, and I rushed out and buy one, and now I hadn't even heard anything about watch control after 6. He doesn't care. For his own personal reasons, however, questionable and silly. That's just my opinion, don't hold me. That there may have been, he rushed out and got a watch while having no concern over life's own interest, however silly that might have been, about the possibility of watch control. But now a little more personal. That's why I was going to bring it. What if we had a person? What if we had someone who had a more private view of this and considered they had an interest? Let's say that things have progressed along a certain way, as you'll see in a minute what I was going to say, without me having to fill in all of the dots or draw them all together. That life, in the great question of watch control, has moved along in a certain manner. And now we're somewhere in the three-dimensional future. And over here we have someone with a private interest, someone attempting to be a neurorevolutionist, and let us say that their own private, personal interest then becomes helping the watchless. Those poor people at some time in the future, if things go a certain way, who might not have watches. And so the person takes it upon themselves. They have the interest that what I want to do in life is I would like to in some way help the watchless. If a person had such an interest, here is what they should do, though. Is they should act and not think, and they should do and don't talk. This would take somebody out of the realm of the ordinary to do that. Because if a real revolutionist attempted, for whatever reason, I'm not suggesting anyone take up charitable works. But I know it's not uncommon for people to feel, still in their wiring system, the need that I should be in some way helping my fellow man. Without the question having to be directly confronted at this time about is it possible to help somebody. Because if you were still even verging on being a revolutionist, see, the somebody, the not I in the equation wouldn't be your concern. It would be that my interest is I. My interest is I want to do it. That you're not even approaching being a revolutionist if you get concerned immediately like, well, I want to do it, but then you got to be concerned whether they want to, because then you're into that good old place where Captain Irony likes to hang around. Sometimes he's in the shadows, but he's over there. It's when you try to help somebody and they say thank you, and you come back and help them again. They say thank you, and you come back again, and you try to help them. They go, could you pick things up a little, you know? That sort of thing. And you think, well, screw you. You can't be a revolutionist and be involved at all for any private reason. And again, I'm not hinting that anybody should be, but people are wired up that they feel that one of my interests in life is I want to help others. If the others are any concern, you can't help, even if it's possible to help, because you will eventually end up dancing with Captain Irony and the other people, because eventually you hand somebody $10 or you keep bringing them a watch. Somebody's watchless, and every week you bring them a watch, then you bring their children a watch. Next week you bring their father a watch. And finally you show up the third or fourth time, they go, is there any chance we could get this in a gold? Could you get something with a nicer band? And you do understand, well, I don't have to bring in Captain Irony to do it. You would have to be Captain Irony's uncle. You would have to be Superman to not have some sort of, shall we just say, if you're ordinary, some sort of less than totally charitable reaction to the person. Or they ask, could you come over at a more convenient time to bring them their money? Or, you know, why are you late? That sort of thing. And just ordinary people, because of the flow of energy. I could go back and deal with toasters and electrons and wires, but do it yourself. There's a quite human tendency to get, I think Freud used to call it the RA. I don't go into it. It does not mean Royal Air Force, though. It means to be irritated in a particular way. It seems to be indigenous to Southern people and those of a Northern Italian persuasion. And a few Greeks I've heard about. It would have to be, if someone was wired up, back to this, if someone just wanted to be, and they were trying to be, if they were approaching, at times, being something out of the ordinary, a neurorevolutionist. We can't beat around the bush all night. if they had an interest that did appear to be in some way charitable, to help the watchless, you've got to go ahead and simply do it. Can't talk about it. You've got to act on whatever it is and not think about it. Not in the ordinary sense. It's not that you can switch off your mind, but it's in this sense that one way that if you want to look at it like this, that you could judge how much of a subversive interest, how much of a subversive attitude you could hold in pursuing a private interest is whether you can do it, and as far as you're concerned, not actually talk about it. Not actually talk about it. Not actually talk about it. Who can be charitable? Back to this, and I'm not picking on charity. I'm just using this because this would seem far removed than some of the examples, and I want you to see that there is no exception that covers the full spectrum of a person's individual interest. It can have an interest that life has. Many other people have an interest that seems to be admirable and extremely civilized to say, well, I've been lucky in life, I've been fortunate in life, at least my nose is not as big as that guy. You know. And so I should help those less fortunate, those who have bigger schnozzes than I do. I've got a lot of watches. I got a lot of watches before they passed this legislation, but look at all the poor people that were not as lucky as I was for whatever reason, and they need watches. If you're going to pursue such as that, if you want to judge how much of it might be that you might be handling in a revolutionist way, whatever the hell that is, it would be the degree to which you could do it and not talk about it. That you can simply act and not actually think in the ordinary sense, such as, back to my example that seemed pretty harsh, but if you're pursuing trying to help the watchless, and you'd picked out this one family, and once a week you bring them all a watch, one at a time, a kid and a mother and a grandmother, and then one week the guy says, can't we get this in a gold? And if you're ordinary, of course, we're not picking on anybody, and we don't really have to drag in Captain Iron, except all of you seem to like him. I guess someday you expect me I'm going to draw him, but I don't have to. Go home and look in the mirror. Well, I don't mean just yourself. You have to know how to do it. Go in the mirror, and you have to glance real quick up over your shoulder, but it's gone just like that, but there he is. There's nothing wrong, but you understand, the ordinary is because of the flow of energy. An ordinary person, no matter how charitable, trust me, Albert Schweitzer, if he had been doing this, going over way across town, bringing these people watch after watch, trying to get the whole family, and finally the head guy, the father of the family, one day says, we're getting kind of bored with this, so could you bring the next one in a gold? Even Albert Schweitzer, would you trust me? To himself would think, fuck you. Well, perhaps I am being a bit overdone, but allow me to say this to you. Albert, to himself, would have said something. Would you believe that? You can scratch that. I was just a cheap joke, but you don't know how he used to talk about people either. So don't feel like that he has been unduly kicked around. But would you trust me that Albert, Buddha, anybody you want to think about, if they'd come over again, got up, drove across town, brought another watch to the watchless family, and somebody says, could we get that in a different color next time? That to themselves, they would have had no choice. Their nervous system, Mary and the little lamb walking along, one of them would have gone, bah. Mary or the lamb would have thought something. Let's say that Albert or whoever it was might not have said anything overtly, which is, in the city, that's a big deal. That can keep you from getting killed. A revolutionist just not saying anything overtly, that doesn't amount to spit. Well, unless some of you think it's important, and I hate to make you think you've wasted all this time. But, an idiot, a kid idiot out in the city, even a Schweitzer, even a Buddha, even a Jesus or a Socrates, because he's not a good example, I don't guess. Well, of course, he's a great example, but we ain't got time. It's getting more and more off the track. An ordinary idiot, a president, a king, a priest, a rabbi in the city. If somebody stands up and says, we decide that everybody's going to get a silver-plated watch. If there's anybody who has any objection, please raise your hand and we'll shoot you right now. Even the most charitable person, even an idiot child in the city can refrain from saying anything. And the guy with the firing squad say, well, come on now, we can't, just speak up and we'll shoot you. And let us say that you do have an objection to it. And you're just an ordinary, run-of-the-mill idiot child. I don't see none of you look less, I don't see anybody below that level. So, and so you don't say anything. Hey, did your mother raise an idiot or not? So in a sense, in the city, that is big time. That can keep your ass from being shot. But to a revolutionist, that doesn't amount to anything. Right? It's a matter of whether, while you're trying to pursue this aim that would appear to be rather charitable, to help the watchless. And they say, could you start coming over later? And would you bring next time something in gold? I think it'd look better with my skin color, don't you? Anybody, Albert Schweitzer, to himself, he got no choice. We're talking about Mary and the Lamb in there. We're talking about the flow of electrons in the line. I mean, just because you go up to a toaster and it comes up burnt again and you look down the toaster and you say, you're a sorry piece of work. Is that the best you can do? The toaster cannot refrain from saying something. That is, as long as it's plugged in. If you're attempting to do something that would appear to be non-personal, charitable, and it arose that they said, could you come over a little earlier? Could you bring it to me in gold? If you have to think, if you have to respond, forget outside, that is overtly, to yourself, your hobby is not what you think it is. Your personal interest is not what you think it is. There's nothing wrong. That's the nature of life. But insofar as you believing that you are pursuing a private enterprise, a private interest aside from life's, that you're simply being charitable. Your family doesn't know. You've never told your wife or husband. You didn't even tell the people you're helping your name. Until the day they go, could you bring us the next watch in gold? Or whatever it was. Or if they say, could you park down the street? Some of my neighbors begin to think that we're getting charity or that you're up to... Whatever happened. Forget the example. It doesn't matter. I just brought up one I thought it would get you. In ordinary life, it'd get people to think, well, the damn bastards, me helping them. Now they go, could you bring it to me in gold? Boy. It doesn't matter what they said. If they can say anything, that is, if energy can run from that direction, and what appears to be your private interest is affected by it, that is, that you respond, forget out saying it out loud, that Albert thinks anything, that the charity bringer, responds in any way to what's said, then your interest was not personal and private. Nothing wrong with it, but your interest is simply life's interest. It's part of, I could call it, the dance of charity. People kill each other over charity. All kinds of hard feelings, all kinds of harsh words. But it's not your private interest if you can do it without thinking. Unless you can do it without thinking. Unless you can do it without internal thought. That you hear them say, boy, I wish you'd bring us a watch in gold. We're sick of this silver color. If you respond to that, which you've got to be extraordinary not to. And you're not, of course, supposed to be extraordinary. But you are not engaged in some personal interest if you respond to that. And you can't fake it. Because in the city, people can fake it. Such as they holler, who hates the king? We're going to give you a chance. Just holler, I do, and we'll shoot you. But we won't know who actually hates the king because the king said for all he knows, he might have some bad habit that he wasn't aware of. So anybody that doesn't like the king, just say so. And you could be out in the city and be, have the IQ of a goddamn attorney or something. And go, well, I don't believe I'll say anything. I don't like that old bastard, but I don't think I'll say anything. Today does not strike me as a good day to die. Plus I got tickets tonight to the hockey game. And so he doesn't raise his hand. That is not some kind of transcendental insight. And it's not even possible for an ordinary person not to respond internally. They can do things like try to deflect it, try to rationalize it, and all kinds of descriptions which mean nothing. I'm aware of it. But it would only be somebody already pursuing and knowing how some private interest, in this case I was using charitable interest because that is a very viscid one to try and think about and talk about. And once those receiving charity began to complain, if you respond at all, if you have anything to say, then that was not your interest. Nothing wrong. But it is an absolute way to tell that was not your interest. You were just going along with one of life's interests. I guess you had nothing better to do. How was that for a way out? Bye.